In the second part of our dialogue with Chet Greenwood of Ethan Allen Manufacturing and Anya Tynio of the Newport Daily Express, we examine the opioid epidemic and President Trump's popularity in the Northeast Kingdom. How has the opioid epidemic affected the kingdom?
I would say negatively, honestly. And of course, that's the response.
Yeah.
But when you look at the opioid epidemic, not just as drug abuse, the loss of jobs, the extent that Children and Family Services gets involved with trying to take care of the children, with the health care where we have a higher risk of HIV and all kinds of health problems that stem from drug abuse.
Right.
It is more widespread than people realize. It is not just the abuse itself, but it is the entire consequences, not to mention the emotional consequence for the families involved. It's tragic on every level.
So I was reading about these, drug epidemics that we've had. So we had the heroin one in the 70s, and we had cocaine in the 80s, crack cocaine. And so these actually started in the urban centers and then moved out. But when it comes to the opioid epidemic, that locus was actually Appalachia, coal country, the Rust Belt, and rural parts of the nation, like the Northeast Kingdom, falls into that category because you had manufacturing leave, outsourcing happen, and the despair, kind of created the right mix for that.
I think that there's a misconception about drug abuse being urban.
Yeah.
There definitely is. And the despair and the hopelessness definitely played a role. It was also more inexpensive at the time to do this, and so it hit poor areas very hard. It did start, like you said, in the Rust Belt, Appalachia, all of these places, and unfortunately it has spread across the country.
Right.
And
so, I'm sorry, but this was an issue that actually tipped the election, the presidential election in 2016, where you had a lot of white working class voters, with this despair, voting for President Trump. So in 2016, voters in the kingdom overwhelmingly supported the president, and the Vermont media and political establishment were quick to dismiss this as evidence of racism. What actually explains Trump's appeal in the kingdom?
Well, I think Trump, he does exactly what he says he's going to do. He doesn't pander to any class of voters, and I don't see how anybody could call him a racist. If you want to protect your borders and defend your borders, he's getting called a racist.
So what can Vermonters do to push back against these malicious narratives when really, in fact, Vermonters in the kingdom, for example, want to live in economically prosperous and robust towns, but the narrative is that they are racist or they're xenophobic. So how can Vermonters push back against this narrative?
I think what you're doing with the dialogues of Meg Hansen, and we have others, Guy Page has 2 print articles, dialogues from the State House.
Yeah.
And Bob Frenier, Real Vermont News. I think that has a good media coverage, and it really tells the truth. And that's what we have to do.
So you're saying we should take control of the media?
We have to find new avenues of reaching people. The traditional media is never going to support our message or even give us equal time.
Right.
So we do have to find new avenues. And as far as Donald Trump's appeal in the Northeast Kingdom, it was his appeal across the United States. His message resonated. We were looking for better than we had, and we have received that, and that's why he is so popular in the Northeast Kingdom.
So speaking about hope and despair and why that's so important in the Northeast Kingdom, Anya and Chet, we're going to continue our conversation next week, where we will look at how the perpetrators of the EB5 scandal preyed on the despair that has a chokehold on the kingdom. Join us then.